Last video, we created our form and got the UI structure for our account screen done. In this video, we're going to refactor a bit into the view model and then also implement some text validation and a little bit of error handling. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is in our account view folder, because again, the view model should go in the same screen here, do Command N for a new file, Swift UI, nope, just Swift file, not Swift UI view. This is our view model. So account view model, cool, hit create. And again, I don't know, my personal preference, I like to have the view model on top of the view. And okay, cool, import Swift UI. Hopefully some of this is starting to be review, right? And maybe you can even try to do this yourself before I do it. I know I didn't issue an official challenge, but you know, if you want to try it, give it a try. Final class account view model, and that is going to conform to observable object. And then now before we go any further, let's go into our account view and actually create that view model. And again, we're going to initialize a new one. So when we initialize a new one, which one do we use? At state object. We actually haven't even used observed object. And again, it really depends on how your data is structured, if you're passing data, etc. But anyway, state object var view model equals account view model, initialize a new one. Okay, while we're here, what we're going to refactor is all of this stuff. And some other stuff, but to start, all of this stuff here, right? So I'm going to Command X, copy that, go back to our view model. We're going to paste it here, and then a little quick editing trick. If you hold Option and drag here, you can like edit these all at once. So these are not state private vars anymore. Remember, they're going to be published, because when these change, we want to publish it. Our account view is going to be listening to those changes, right? Said that a bunch of times. Hopefully you get it by now. At published var, there we go. And now, as usual, when we go to our account view, we're going to get all kinds of errors because we no longer have first name. We no longer have last name, right? Well, just like we've done before, we want to do view model dot. And then again, just like I've done before, I'm going to copy the view model dot, paste it in right in front of the $sign everywhere I need it. Okay, so basically I just changed all the variable names from just their normal variable names to, you know, view model dot, you know, whatever we needed. Did a Command B, hit resume, no errors. We are good to go. Again, I just like to test along the way. This should be working, but pulling up the simulator, hitting account, you know, cool. I can type something. All right, cool. Again, just want to make sure you don't break anything when you're doing these big refactors. Okay, so that first part of the refactor is out, right? In the view model, we got all the properties here. Now we want to start validating the text. Because again, like we want to let them know if they entered a wrong email, like if the email didn't have an @ sign or didn't have .com at the end, right? We want to let them know if it's valid. Or we want to like, hey, if they missed a field, we want to pop up an error saying incomplete form, you know, please fill out everything. So this is just basic text validation. Text validation can get pretty tricky if you have a very extensive form, but this is just kind of a basic, you know, couple examples to get you started on that. And for that, we're going to create a computed property called isValidForm. So I can do var isValidForm, and that is of type Boolean. And the computation that has to happen is here's where we check to see if it's valid or not. And the first check we want to do is to make sure all the forms have some value in it, right? Make sure it's not an empty form. So we can do guard not first name dot is empty. So we're checking for an empty string, right? But we want to make sure like it's not empty, right? So basically we're going to do that for our text field. So and not last name dot is empty. Again, same thing for the email. And dot email dot is empty. Cool. So if well, we can put this all on one line, because we're just going to return false, right? So if any of these are empty, we're returning false, basically. So isValidForm is not valid, it is false because we have an empty field. And again, I just put that all on one line for neatness. Oh, I forgot my else. Yep, there we go. And then Xcode's telling me I'm missing my overall return. So how this works is return true. Basically, we're going to do these checks, and if the checks fail, we're going to return false. If all the checks pass, we're going to return true for isValidForm. That's the rundown here. So our first check is to make sure we have values in all the fields, to make sure it's not like an empty form. Cool. Actually, you know what? I just realized I can't put these all in one line because I got ahead of myself. We are going to be, you know, showing an error item or an alert item. So we'll make room for that for later. So the next check we want to do is to make sure the email is valid. And this is very common. Like anytime you have like a login screen or anything like that, you're probably going to want this check. So this is well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's type this out first. Guard email.isValid. Well, what is that is valid? We don't have that yet. I know. We'll get there. Else return false, right? And we're going to pop an error message up there. So we'll leave room for that. Okay, so let's talk about this is valid. This is going to be an extension on a string that uses a regular expression to check to make sure it fits a proper format. So as you'll see, this is kind of complex and well beyond the scope of SwiftUI fundamentals, talking about regular expressions, but I'm going to include this extension as a file that you can download. It's real short, but go ahead and download it from below the video and then copy and paste into your own project here. But in our utilities, right, in our extensions folder, do a command N for a new file, new Swift file. This is going to be a string extension, so string plus ext, that's the typical format for our extensions. And then I'm going to paste this in as well. I'll explain it, don't worry. But this is something that I carry with me from project to project because, again, you pretty much always need to make sure the email is valid. And this is why I'm not going to explain this because I'm not going to lie. I don't know how to write these regular expressions. You can Google regular expressions for password validation, and it's some combination of this gibberish, right? Don't get me wrong. It's valid. People know how to use this stuff. I never took the time to learn how to write this code off the top of my head. I don't suggest you do either, unless regular expressions are a huge part of your job or your project. But typical things you're going to use these for are, to validate an email. Again, the password validation. You know how passwords have hey, one capitalized letter, one special character, must be 8 long. You can implement all those requirements via a regular expression like this. And again, it'll be another gobbledygook of characters. But kind of what this does here is you can see I have a certain range of characters where I can use capital letter A through Z, 1 through 9, and lowercase letters A through Z. It's basically alphanumeric. Here's some special characters I can use in my email, right? Dashes plus. But you see this plus @ sign? This means an @ needs to be in my email, right? My email can't just be Sean Allen, right? This is basically going to make sure I have an @ sign in my email. And then before the dot and the .com, I can have, this would be the Gmail portion of the gmail.com, the Yahoo of the yahoo.com. Same thing, alphanumeric, capital A to Z, lowercase a to Z, 0 through 9, and then these characters. And then to make sure it has a dot, and then it makes sure, again, A to Z. And then here's the thing. After the dot, the .com portion, it must be at least 2 characters. So an example of this would be .co, .us, right? 2 characters, but it can be max of 64. So that way you can't just have .z, because that's not a valid domain name. So that is what the regular expression is doing. Now again, these can get crazy complex. I don't suggest you go out and learn them. That's why I recommended just copying and pasting this in here. All this is doing is checking to make sure it follows that specific format that I just went over. Okay, so back to our account view model. Now if I do a command B, or is valid, should be working. It's not, I probably named it differently. Yes, is valid email. Yes, let's be very specific there. So back to our account view model, is valid email. Because really this check can go on any string. So if I just said is valid, that's confusing, right? So we want to make sure you're checking for an invalid email, so naming matters. Okay, so now we have the logic for our checks in place. The only thing missing is what we do when false happens. Well, what we're going to do is show an alert. And this is challenge time, right? Here you have the project as it is. We're going to implement something we've implemented twice already before, and that is our alert item and then the updated alert context, right? So see if you can, use what we've done before, add your alert item to the view model, add your alert to the view, and then update your alert context, right? If you haven't done my challenges yet, this should be a relatively easy one. We've done this 3 times. It's the exact same thing. So give it a shot. I encourage that. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're going to do it. So like I mentioned, we need to have that alert item that we've had a couple times before now. So at published var alert item, it is of type alert item, it is optional. And here before I can create these, right, I want to do alert item equals alert context dot, well, I don't have my alert set up. So let's go to alert context. That is in our alerts folder. In the alert, okay, so alert context, we have these alerts. Going to copy and paste because again, we're going to use the same structure twice, except here before we customize these, here's what I do. Because like I mentioned, when we first built this this can get out of hand. So there's many ways you can like organize it. You can create separate files in an extension on alert context to like group them that way. Typically what I do is I use just, / mark, and then I will say, network alerts. And then I'll copy this. And then down here, I'll give some visual spacing, like one extra vertical space. And then this will be, account alerts, right? So I separate them like that. Or again, you could parse them out into their own separate files on extensions. That's cool too. But anyway, this one is not going to be unable to complete. It's going to be invalid form. And then we'll tab this over to where it needs to be. And then it's not going to be server error. Again, invalid form. And then it will say, please ensure all fields in the form have been filled out. Cool. And then this one is not going to be unable to complete. It is going to be invalid email. And then title, same thing, invalid email. And then similarly, please ensure your email is correct. Right? You can write whatever you want in there, but that's the message that's going to show up in our alert. So if we do Command B to make sure that's all good, go back to our view model. Now our alert context for our empty field should have invalid form. Okay, cool. So that's the alert we're going to show up if any of these are empty. What don't you like? Command B. Okay, Xcode. So now here we want to make our alert item, alert item dot equals alert context, and that alert context, if the email is invalid, is dot invalid email. Cool. So those are our nice clean alerts that we're going to pop up in those cases. If these checks, pass, then we're just returning true, which means our form is valid. So now that we have this alert item being set properly, again, we're only doing one side of the communication pattern right now, right? We're broadcasting. We've set up our broadcast perfectly. It's going to broadcast the right stuff. Nobody's listening to this alert, right? We have our account view set up to listen to the view model. Cool. But we're not utilizing the alert anywhere here. And again, this is review. We've done this before. So on our navigation view, I'll scroll up a bit, do .alert. And then again, not just as presented, because that's where you got to pass in a bool. We want the item, because we're passing the item. Again, this is review. We want the binding to .viewModel.alert item. And then the content, get rid of that. Open the closure, alert item in. And then here's where we create our alert. And then initialize it with a title message dismiss button. The title is alert item dot title. What are we missing? I misspelled it. Forgot the T up there. Cool. And then alert item dot message, and then the dismiss button, alert item dot dismiss. Again, we've done this like 3 times by now. Hopefully you got it. Hopefully you did the challenge. Hopefully you got the challenge. Do Command B there. Hit resume just to make sure our preview is working. Cool. Now we're about 90% of the way there. We're missing the final piece of the puzzle, and that is like what triggers all this. So back to the view model, right? We've set up the variable, but we're not like calling this variable or using it anywhere. So here in the account view, when do we want to do this? We want to do this on when save changes gets tapped. So we got to create a function in our view model to do something when we tap save changes. So in the view model, below is valid form, let's create a function here. So func save changes. And the first thing we want to do is check is valid form, right? So guard is valid form, else return. And we're just returning, we're not showing an error here because our error handling is handled in this is valid form, right? So is valid form will check that. So basically, if is valid form is false, we're just going to return out of save changes. We're going to show the error properly. If is valid form is true, we're going to continue on in this function. For now, we're just going to print changes have been saved successfully. And we're going to deal with this in a later video, but for now, that's what we're going to do to prove that this is working. So let's test this, and then I'll run through the logic again real quick as a review. So back to our account view. I didn't have to do that, I guess. Let's just run it in the simulator. Okay, let's click on account. Now, the first thing we want to test is empty form, right? So hit save changes. I do this all the time. I do this all the time. All right, hit stop. You got to call the function. If you want your function to run, you got to call the function. So instead of just printing save, we got to call view model dot save changes. Okay, I do it all the time. Hit play, and let's do this again. Okay, now back to the account. Save changes. There you go, invalid form. Please ensure all fields of the form have been filled out. Okay, cool. I'll listen to you. So click in first name, type Sean. And by the way, if you can do Command K to hide and show your keyboard, if you want to like see the UI. So Sean, okay, last name, Alan. Cool, that's all filled in. Email, right? That's not a valid email. So hit Save Changes. There you go. Invalid email. Please ensure your email is correct. We can test our validation even further. So we can do seanallen.dev@gmail, right? We have the @ symbol, but we don't have like the .com. Save changes. Nope. Invalid email. Okay, let's try .c, right? Because .c is not a valid email either. Save changes. Invalid email. Huh, okay. So .com. Save changes. It printed. Should have printed. Yes, changes have been saved successfully, as you see down there. So our UI is done. We've refactored it to the view model. We've kind of handled text validation. We've error handled a form, because error handling on forms is important because, as I just showed, users can typically mess up a form. So you want to be very good about your error handling in that case. We just did some basic text validation there. But yeah, let's move on.